forum on landlord-tenant matters, and specifically the issue of evictions. And I want to thank the elected officials who are on this call, and I'm seeing a lot. There are too many to recognize by name, but thank you so much for dedicating the time to this important issue. Before we begin, I think we need to address the fact of the mass shooting last night in Boulder, the massacre of 8 people in Atlanta last week, and also the mass shooting in Philadelphia over the weekend that left 1 dead and 5 injured. If we could just take a moment of silence for the victims of these crimes. Thank you. If you could just create, some space and love and thought on all those victims, I think that would be an important thing. Over the past year, we have seen a global pandemic take the lives of 500,000 Americans, and we have had to shut down our lives as we knew them in order to try to contain the virus. We need to be aware of the toll of the virus and this pandemic on our mental health. We need to be aware of the impact on our children whose schooling has been interrupted. But over this past year, we've also seen a reckoning on institutional racism that has been and still is present in our society. As an elected official, as a public servant, I've asked myself over and over again, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about this reckoning? How am I going to respond? And the answer that I've come up with is to continue to speak out against injustice, to take actions within my office, the Office of the Prothonotary, to help those that are vulnerable. And most importantly, to listen, and then to listen more. My office, the Office of the Prothonotary, is where a county resident will appeal their eviction from a local judge. Local judge, sometimes you hear district judge or district justice. The majority of the residents appealing their eviction are struggling financially, and the majority of those appealing are people of color. I took steps within my office to make this appeals process clearer for residents who are struggling with eviction or impending eviction. I worked with the courts to ensure that information about the appeals process was provided to every resident who was evicted. As the courthouse was shut down to individuals trying to appeal these evictions, I worked with the county to open a special landlord-tenant office in 1 Montgomery Plaza across from the courthouse in Norristown. And we are now serving on average 10 residents a week, but for this office would not have been able to appeal their eviction. However, by the time a resident is appealing their eviction, it may, from a local judge, it may be truly too late. We need to address this issue early on. Some landlords are truly struggling as well. The landlord who pays their own mortgage with the payment for their rental property. But those being evicted face tremendous strains. Neighborhoods are fractured, and during the pandemic, children lose their home, which has doubled as their school. Families lose the home that has been their greatest weapon against COVID because they protect themselves from COVID in their homes. We are here today to inform everyone on this call about the resources that are available to renters, to tenants, and we're here today to talk about this issue, to shed light on the devastation that evictions cause in our community, and specifically the impact on the Black and Brown community. So I just want to really quickly introduce all the participants on our call today. I want to thank them so much. We've had lots of email exchanges and phone calls in preparation for this. I want to especially thank Vice Chair, County Board of Commissioners, Ken Lawrence. We have the President of the Norristown NAACP, Angie Hinton. We have the President of the Cheltenham NAACP, Eddie Graham. A Cheltenham NAACP member, Natasha Taylor-Smith, who's also an attorney here in Montgomery County. Executive Director for ACLAMO, Nelly Jimenez. Norristown Councilman Hakim Jones. We have a representative from the County Your Way Home program, Kyle Tribble. And we have a representative from Southeastern Legal Aid, Michelle Dempsky. But I'm going to turn things over to my friend to start us off, Ken Lawrence.
All right, thank you, Noah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Good to see some people. I was looking through the gallery view there, so I can't start calling out people because that will go on way too long. Noah, first, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in this. I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue, for continuing to shine a light on it. And thank you for your partnership in the Prothonotary's office during this last year on so many issues, truly increasing the outreach of that office and making sure the community knows the services that you can provide. As you all know, March 2020 was a very long year for all of us in Montgomery County and across the nation. And despite some, we're not done yet. This pandemic is not over. We have 102 new cases today. So we have 49,620 cases since we received our first cases on March 7th. One new death, which takes us to 1,255. People are still struggling. People who lost their jobs still have not gotten those jobs back. And that's why this is just such a critical issue, because the last thing you want to worry about during a pandemic is losing that roof over your head. I mean, think about that. When we have kids who are doing virtual schooling, they need a roof over their head. Even if you have family and friends that you could go and stay with, we are still social distancing. So this isn't the time to have to combine and do that. But unfortunately, we're coming to the point where the eviction suspension will end on March 31st. And then on April 1st, the utility shutoff moratorium will end as well. So there are going to be people who, are going to be facing that right now. So that's why it's so important to get this information out there. The county, it's been one of our priorities during this pandemic to try to keep people in their homes, to keep a roof over their heads. Let's be very clear. If you were struggling before the pandemic, you are struggling worse as a result of it. We know that there are disparities in our county, the second wealthiest county in Pennsylvania. We have poor people in this county. We have citizens who are food insecure, over 100,000, 13% of those are children. That was before the pandemic. We had people living on the streets before the pandemic. I'm so proud of our social safety net organizations who have worked tirelessly during this pandemic to try to keep people in their homes, to try to keep our children fed. But there's work to be done coming out of this. We're in emergency mode now. We're in reaction mode now still. We knew that those disparities were out there before the pandemic. We did not fix them before the pandemic, and people have suffered as a result of that. So, Noah talked about his challenge, and I take that challenge as well. We need to get some of these things done. We have 21 school districts in Montgomery County. When we switched to virtual learning, at least 3 of those districts had to figure out how to feed their children. It wasn't about getting them Chromebooks. It wasn't about getting assignments. It was literally figuring out how to feed their children, because so many of their children are on the free breakfast and lunch program. I don't care that we're the second wealthiest county in Pennsylvania. If we have to worry about feeding our kids if they're not in school, because we know that they can't get those meals at home. So I appreciate everyone who's on today to hear about this. I'm going to kick it to Kyle Tribble now, who works for Your Way Home, a county agency, and he'll share some more information about a program that the county kicked off just last week to help tenants and landlords, but to keep people in their homes, to keep a roof over their heads. So Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Tribble, Community Relations Manager for Your Way Home. Pretty much Your Way Home is a public-private partnership within Montgomery County focused on making homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring within Montgomery County. So pretty much what we do, I always offer people just for the most up-to-date resources, referrals related to whether it be emergency shelter or housing assistance or emergency rent assistance. And we advise Montgomery County community to contact Your Way Home call center, and they can do that by contacting 211. You can also contact our call center by texting your zip code to 898-211. So pretty much as Commissioner Lawrence has mentioned, Your Way Home will be administering emergency rent and utility program within Montgomery County. So to receive that rent and utility assistance, we have a few things that we want the public to just be aware of. So we place a lot of this information on yourwayhome.org/Eric, and that will be Eric with a U. So it will be ERUC. And I'll be sure to leave a link in the chat once we're finished. But that page will be able to give you an outline of one, who to contact to receive services, eligibility requirements, and also the documents needed. As community relations manager, I encourage everyone to visit the site, but if anything is unclear about the site, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. With any questions, I'm always willing to answer. So that's pretty much what we're doing. We're offering this service for up to 12 months for folks who are struggling and impacted by COVID-19. So the website will give a real detailed outline of all those things needed and the documents needed to apply. Thank you.
Kyle, thank you so much. One of the things that, like I said, we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having a discussion in a few minutes, kind of how evictions impact our communities. But what we're doing up front here is giving out the resources that people can really utilize here in the county. And a lot of people on this call are school board directors. A lot of people on this call are council people or supervisors or commissioners within our different municipalities here in the county. And we tailored this really for all of you, kind of as ambassadors within our community.
You're muted, Noah.
All right, I got muted somehow. But take the information that we're giving here today. So all that great information that Your Way Home was just providing, and disseminate it as best you can, because people within the school districts are going to need it. People within our towns and boroughs are going to need it as well. So I just want to turn it over now. We've heard from Commissioner Ken Lawrence with the county, Your Way Home with the county. One person that also wanted to take, if they could just take a minute here, or maybe a minute or two, and wanted to hop on, and is from the county as well, is from our county sheriff's department. And our sheriff, Sean Kilkenny, has been doing some work regarding evictions as well. And my understanding is Sonia Sanders from the sheriff's department. I see her down in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. If you could just take a minute, Sonia, and explain what the sheriff's department is doing on this issue.
Sure. Thanks, Noah. Good afternoon, everyone. So with the crisis of COVID, the sheriff has actually taken on a policy within MSCO to actually approve these requests himself, feeling as though it's the moral thing to do. In times like this, what he has done is he's changed the process a little bit. So now the process looks like the data entry workers, they type the case into the computer system, and then it normally goes out on the road. So what the sheriff has done is he has interjected himself prior to the eviction papers going out on the road. The sheriff reviews the document, checks to see if the landlord has any sort of verification in terms of whether or not the tenant had actually waived their CDC rights. And based on whether evidence is present, that's when the sheriff will approve the eviction.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonia. And
you're quite welcome.
And I think that Sheriff Kilkenny I think would agree with me that once it gets to my office and someone is appealing their eviction, or once it gets to Sheriff Kilkenny's department and they're actually effectuating the evictions or serving the eviction papers, it's way too late. So we're taking steps, and that's important. But really, it's about making sure that people who have impending evictions know what resources are out there to help them out. So like Your Way Home is a resource, for example. But also Southeastern Legal Aid does amazing work in representing people that can't afford an attorney. And we have attorney Michelle Dempsky on this call participating. and she's just going to speak for a few minutes about kind of the legal issues or legal hurdles that people face. Michelle?
Thank you very much for that introduction. So everyone, I'm Michelle Dempsky. I'm a landlord tenant attorney with Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania. I personally work out of Norristown, covering most of our Montgomery County cases. For those of you who aren't aware, Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania provides free legal services in the civil context to Bucks, Montgomery, Delaware, and Chester counties. So I focus on Montgomery County, but by all means, if anyone needs our services, we do provide in multiple counties. Typically, the areas that we handle are family law, domestic violence, housing, bankruptcy and consumer law, unemployment, public benefits, social security, and expungements, as well as a few other areas. So obviously, being the landlord tenant attorney here, I've been watching this eviction crisis begin to unfold. It has disproportionately affected our clients who are, of course, low income. We've seen in total in Pennsylvania about 240,000 people who are at risk of facing eviction this year. People who are low income tend to spend proportionally more on their housing. 3 in 4 of our clients spend about 50% of their income towards their actual housing costs. 1 in 4 can spend up to 70%. And obviously, due to cross-cutting relationships with race and national origin, there is a disproportionately huge effect on minority communities. And unfortunately, this doesn't have a quick and easy solution. But at Legal Aid, what we focused on primarily is, one, utilizing the CDC moratorium to extend the time that clients have in housing, and trying to point them towards various rent relief organizations, some that we at Legal Aid are personally involved with, such as the EPIC program, and others, as previously mentioned by Mr. Tribble, the ERUC rent assistance. We help them in the application process, in securing those funds in order to stabilize their housing. Especially helpful now that the new round of rent relief has a prospective assistance of up to 3 months. But we've also seen a number of landlords, especially the larger landlords, who are using very interesting tactics, relying not on non-payment of rent, but things like expiration and non-renewal of the lease, or non-monetary violations that they had previously consented to, anything to get around the eviction moratorium. And I hate to say it, but a lot of our clients don't have the legal knowledge or the ability to really combat their arguments. They're not in court regularly. They don't know the procedure. If they retain us early, we tend to get a very high clearance rate for essentially delaying or even defeating the evictions. So it's our hope that as more and more tenants might be facing this impending crisis, any of those that are eligible will apply. I'll be happy to put in our intake line in the chat. So if anyone knows anyone that can benefit from our services, please feel free to recommend them to us. We'll do all of the due diligence to make sure they qualify for our services and assist them from that point on. We do assist them at the magisterial district level, and even prior to the filing of any complaint, if they have a notice to quit or any other issues, we assist them depending on the case with common pleas appeals. So anything, at any point in the process, they can come to us, and at the very least, we'll be able to give them legal advice, if not outright representation. Obviously, you've noticed a huge uptick in the number of cases, something like 60 to 70% more than we typically get. So we've used some new grant funding to hire additional staff to handle that influx. So at this point, Legal Aid is open to accepting new clients and hopefully helping them to push this eviction crisis off as long as possible, or even to defeat it entirely with the rent assistance coming through. Some of the other services that we offer, like helping with unemployment compensation claims, obviously helps stabilize their income in the short term. I'd be happy to speak more to it, but I believe I'm coming up close on my 3-minute mark. So before I get too deeply involved, I'll save any questions for later, and I'll be happy to turn it back to you, Noah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And a lot of folks are putting in the chat or actually texting me about resources and the availability of some of these resources. So you're sharing some of those links in the chat, and we'll make sure to send out some more information towards the end of the program as well. You know, our next speaker is Hakim Jones, a councilman from the municipality of Norristown, and I think it's really important to have you know, a representative from Norristown on this call. And there's actually many, which is fantastic. But someone speaking to some of the resources available. Norristown is getting hit really hard, has a lot of renters, but there's other areas, you know, throughout the county that are getting hit hard. It really is throughout the county, Pottstown, and maybe some areas that you might not think of, but that have a lot of renters in them. Willow Grove area, Cheltenham has a lot of renters, disproportionate to the population in Cheltenham. So I think it's really important that we have a conversation about a lot of the different municipalities and how they're being impacted. But Hakim, it'd be great if you could talk about Norristown a little bit and kind of specifically what you all are doing.
Sure. Thank you, Noah. And, you know, before I started, I wanted to acknowledge my colleagues on the call, Council President Derek Perry and Councilwoman Sonia Sanders. So as we all know, evictions can be a touchy yet embarrassing topic for many. Basically, you know, as elected officials, we have just as much skin in the game as anybody. So, you know, we as a council, we've worked hard. Anybody that knows anything about Norristown, we're a small community. So when one person is impacted, you know, many of us are impacted. Many of us know the residents. Many of us could potentially be related. I mean, you'd be surprised. But so Norristown as a whole, we've done many things. We've drafted some resolutions and some language that supports what's happening at the federal level around putting a halt on evictions. We can't force things to stop, but we can support the national scope of things. We've dug within our budget, which isn't the largest budget. We've been able to allocate some funding, a little bit over $200,000 to assist residents who are presented with evictions and falling behind on rent and sometimes their mortgages. Our rental registrations, sometimes we realize that evictions start as early as the rental registration process with landlords. We've changed some laws to make those rental registrations tie someone to a local person. So if you are a landlord or you're a housing agency renting properties in Norristown, we need a contact who's local, who's within a 30-minute radius of our town. So that does allow us to help eradicate some things in a quicker span. There were past practices around targeting families and giving them 3 strikes and putting them out of their homes. So I know as a council, we put together some language and some legislation to eliminate that 3-strike law. You know, that's just one thing. And lastly, I think we just did something recently. Kudos to Council President Perry. Absentee landlords and slumlords need to be acknowledged as well and recognized and sometimes put on blast. So we are working to make some landlords accountable for the way they treat people and some of the mispractices. So we do know some landlords are listed at the county level, but also at the local level. Tenants should be able to know who these bad landlords are, what landlords are treating people unfairly and not always upkeeping on their property. So we put together a lot of legislation. As I mentioned, these are things that impact all of us, whether it's our friends, families, and people we even went to school with. So that's just a little bit on what we're doing as a local municipality, and kudos to all the other elected officials. I'm sure you're working on things as well.
Thank you so much, Hakim. So between the county resources and the legal resources you just heard about and some of the specific resources in Norristown, you can definitely check the chat. All those things have been linked. So you'll see links in the chat that you can direct people to within your municipality. But I'd like to open things up to the participants on the call, to Hakim and Nelly and Natasha and Eddie and Angie and Ken, just to kind of talk about this issue generally, because I think we need to bring some things out of the shadows and talk about this issue so people understand it. Hakim mentioned how embarrassing it can be to be evicted, how hard that is on families. You know, that's just one aspect of kind of the stigma of it. But if I could start off maybe with Natasha, who's a member of the NAACP. If you could just talk, Natasha, about the impact of evictions where you're from. I know I know you, you know me, I know you live in Cheltenham. What is the impact in your community?
In Cheltenham, there is a huge number of renters. Cheltenham boasts one of the largest apartment complexes in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I believe Landlord Gardens is currently the second largest apartment complex in all of the Commonwealth. And as a result of that, we have seen an enormous amount of evictions in our township. We have always had an issue with evictions long before COVID began. And so if you were listening to Commissioner Lawrence's comments earlier, if you were doing bad before COVID, COVID did nothing to increase your situation. And so I had a conversation, myself and Eddie Graham, who is the president of the Cheltenham NAACP, we had a conversation with Chris Sersky, who is one of the magisterial district justices in Cheltenham, the one who handles most of the landlord-tenant matters, because Landlord Gardens and another huge complex called the Towers are both located within his jurisdiction. And he advised us that there had been 279 filings for evictions this year. And we are in March. That is 279 families who were facing some sort or some degree of homelessness during what is still a pandemic. The numbers, while they have gone down, they still exist. And so these families were looking at losing their homes. One of the things that we talked about is that of those 279 filings for evictions, there were only 74 judgments. And unfortunately, the main reason why there were 74 judgments, why the number was so high, is because many individuals just simply did not show up for court. They got the eviction notice. They knew that they didn't have the finances to pay the rent. And so they thought they had no choice. And that is why programs like EPIC, programs like Your Way Home, forums like this are essential. The whole purpose of us meeting here today is to make sure that individuals know that there are resources available. If any of those 74 individuals had qualified under the CDC moratorium to prevent them from having an eviction judgment, all they had to do was sign a document saying that, and they would have been able to stay in their homes. The Prothonotary, the Sheriff's Department would have never gotten involved. But individuals are afraid, they're frightened, and they are embarrassed. Many people believe because maybe they are essential workers and they were individuals who did not lose their jobs as a result of the pandemic, but are still working very low minimum wage jobs. And so they're unable to make their rent. Those individuals believe maybe the assistance is not for them. And so they don't show up for court. They don't take advantage of the programs that are available to them. One of the other things that we talked about with Judge Sersky, and he agreed to do, and I'm hoping that we will be able to convince other magisterial district justices to do as well, is that whenever a landlord comes in to file a complaint, or their attorney goes in to file a complaint for eviction, a notice of that complaint goes out to the homeowner or to the renter. And what Judge Sersky has agreed to do is to include a brochure from the EPIC program in every complaint that goes out to every tenant in Cheltenham Township. What that will do is that will give them at least the information that these resources are available to them to help them save their homes. Cheltenham, our school district, has done a phenomenal job of trying to ensure that children are still taken care of during the pandemic. We, like many other school districts, were operating virtually for most of the school year. And we are now back in schools, first a little bit of the hybrid, now we're back in schools. And so having a place for individuals where children know that they can go, that they have a home, that they're not afraid, that they're going to be able to continue with their studies, even if they have to do it virtually, is essential to individuals' mental health and well-being. So I know Noah said we only had 3 or 4 minutes, and I think I probably took about every second of those 4 minutes. to talk about what's going on in Cheltenham right now. But I think that what's most important that individuals know is that the assistance that is available to them is not just for those individuals who lost their jobs. It's not just for those individuals who we may think of as completely indigent. There are resources for the poor working class, which many families fall into, which will help them save their homes. And it used to be that if you had gotten assistance from EPIC in the last 12 months, you couldn't apply again. With the new round of money, I think that's changing. And there might even be some proactive assistance. So if the assistance helps you catch up on your rent, it may also be able to pay a month or two in advance, because the idea is that landlords who are running businesses need to be able to continue to run their businesses, but more importantly, individuals need to be able to stay in their homes. So that's what's going on in Cheltenham Township.
Natasha, thank you so much. I have a question for Nelly Jimenez from ACLAMO, but before I get to that, I just want to point out, because some of you have been putting in the chat, I've seen 2 or 3 notes now talking about how some of your friends have contacted some of the resources, and I think specifically the county resources, and there's been a lag, or they haven't gotten a response. I just want to be clear that that's why we're doing what we're doing today, because if people have more resources, I think the county obviously is just overwhelmed with all the people that are calling. But we have a lot of different resources on this call today. So if someone contacts the county, contacts the health department, Your Way Home, they also contact Southeastern Pennsylvania Legal Aid, maybe ACLAMO or their NAACP group, all the different resources, hopefully people can get an answer faster. I think everybody's pretty overwhelmed right now, but the point is to have this collaborative effort to try to give people more opportunities for help. So Nelly, I was just wondering if you could touch on something, reading about evictions and trying to understand them better. One of the things that I'm learning is that when someone's evicted, it can really tear a community apart, because communities are put together with, just let's say a block of houses in a street. Every family brings something to that community. And when you take a family out of that community, it can really kind of cause issues and havoc within that community and disrupt it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I can speak mostly about the Latino experience, right? So I wanted to mention a couple of things. One is that a lot of our families have been highly impacted by COVID. And like someone mentioned before, the problems started way before, but now it has highlighted a lot of the, inequities and problems that we have in our community. A couple of things that we have noticed is that people are trying to survive through this by getting loans, getting money from family members, from loan sharks, and that is going to put them in a worse situation. Afterwards, when we talk about evictions, we're always worried about the kids, right? And the instability of those kids, where they're going to continue their education, if they have been moved, what is going to happen with where they're going to end it up. And, our experience is that many houses not only are not, we see a lot of houses that are not affordable to families, but are also not safe, not only for kids, but for family as a whole. And that has been an issue that we have seen. So a lot of the, when I remember when the moratorium, the new moratorium started, we were excited, but we were also frustrated because the moratorium had a lot of issues. But a lot of the landlords learned too how to avoid the moratorium, right? Because the moratorium was directly linked to someone who was impacted by COVID, but they found other ways not to use the moratorium to protect families. And the moratorium was at the side of the tenants to give the moratorium, and many people didn't know. So when Natasha was talking about, well, we have all these resources, we have to also find ways to share with other people. I also want to mention that for our Latino community, a lot of the resources that are available to other communities, even for families who are in mixed status families, they weren't able to receive any economic support to be able to get money to help them to stabilize their situation. Right now, with the programs that have changed with the new regulations from the federal money that is coming, so that have helped us to avoid the families get out of, they get evicted. The other thing is that we don't have access to legal representation. Is very limited. Again, mostly if families are in mixed status families where they don't qualify because they're not citizens or they're not have paperwork that's going to be an issue. The other big thing is that we do not have data on Latino experiencing homelessness in this county or many places. If you don't have data, you cannot act to help the community. So that's a big issue. I also wanted to address, and I feel horrible when people say, ACLAMO is not answering, or, Boston is not answering, the 6 organizations that are doing the ERIC program. Just to give you an idea, this week we have received 290 applications. We have 4 staff members that are doing, and most of them are part-timers, are doing cases, and they have 40 to 60 clients each. So, and it takes time. So I think that the only thing I can say is that we're all working around the clock, trying to get to those applications. Please be patient. This time we have a longer term to distribute that money. So I'm asking you to have a little bit of patience. We're trying to prioritize people who are going to are going to be evicted. So, but it's going to take some time. The program just opened, so we're going to get to all of them, but we need to, I just needed to say that so people can understand where we are right now.
Thank you so much, Nelly. One of the things that I've heard a couple times now is kind of references to the impact on children. And my next question is for the president of the Norristown NAACP, Angie Hinton. Because Angie, you and I have talked many, many times over the last few months about this issue and many issues. And we've talked about the impact on kids. Can you talk, I know in the Norristown School District, you're very familiar with the school district and you've had kids go through the school district. Can you talk about what you're seeing in your community and the impact on children specifically?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's so important because to, I think, pretty much everybody's point, this is an issue that can impact anyone, right? And so many people get caught up in just the whole, it's traumatic, right? And then also there's that embarrassment aspect of this. And so a lot of times people don't realize there is help available. And so if nothing else, that's what I want people to take away from this. So I thank everyone for coming. Now to speak to Noah's point, in talking to, people in my branch, we were discussing why, so many kids are struggling in school, in the Norristown School District. And there is a lot that are struggling because of everything that's going on. And one of the issues that was raised was eviction was something that was impacting people in this community. And I don't have to imagine what that feels like because I actually lived through that. And so I was a child who, had a parent that struggled with addiction, and I was evicted. And so I can tell you how traumatic that is for a child trying to go to school and learn when you're staying at a neighbor's house, or you don't know where you're going to wake up some days. And it is hugely traumatic. And it's hard for a kid to go to school, in this situation, but to not know where they're going to live and to not have a space where they feel safe is extremely detrimental. And what happens is you see them start to fail in school. I started to act out in school and then ended up getting suspended because of it. And so there's another piece of this, right? Like that we have to also talk about that plays a part, especially in communities of color. But, because I was dealing with this issue in particular, it impacted my, behavior in school. And then, it just is like something that just is extremely difficult to explain. But I will say to people that it is something that, we really need to all think about how we can find ways to make sure that people are getting the resources they need, because it's almost impossible, right, to expect a child to be able to go to school through situations such as this and do well. And so, that's why I think it's so important that we're talking about it. And honestly, that's why we started really diving deeper into this, trying to understand what resources are available so that we can hopefully help some of these children that are struggling with this issue.
Thank you so much, Angie. Appreciate it. My next question's for my friend Eddie Graham. Eddie, Eddie's the president of the Cheltenham NAACP, which is a little bit of a misnomer because it covers way bigger area of land than just Cheltenham, way more municipalities. So it's a really well-respected group, and I appreciate that he's here. Eddie, we've heard some references to the fact that evictions impact people of color at a disproportionate rate. Can you speak to that? Kind of speak to maybe why that is and what you see in your community?
Sure, I can. First of all, thank you, Noah, for putting together this partnership with so many of our elected officials and our residents. And I think I think that we've heard it several times from Natasha, from Nelly, from Angie, and from Ken, that the more important thing is the embarrassment, first of all. And I think the panic of getting an eviction notice or falling behind in the eviction. And as a result of that, in addition to dealing with the other family obligations of making sure that your children have something to eat, making sure that you're able, that if your job is affected, how can you address this issue with your landlord? And then on top of that, you have a lot of, you have a majority of landlords that are just not as polite, and as we are sitting here talking to tenants that are 2 or 3 months behind in their rent. So the main problem that we have is getting this information out to the community that is most directly affected by these discrepancies. And I mean disparities, excuse me. And I think one of the main causes is even if they are allowed to go before the court system, the judge sitting on the bench can't say, hey, this program is available to you. But there has to be a way through our public officials, through our magistrate courts, through our court systems, through our sheriff's department, that this information has to get out through the people that it will benefit. And that's the issue. People don't come to court because they're scared of finding out the results of that, but they don't know that they have resources available that can help alleviate that problem. And in my community, which includes Springfield, Jenkintown, Cheltenham, White Marsh, and Plymouth Meeting, a lot of people that are going through this issues, when we tell them about they were like, oh my God, I wish I had known about this. Oh, I heard that if you lost your job due to COVID, could I apply for these fundings? And when I tell them that, it's like you could see the relief in their eyes. So imagine a parent that knows that these benefits are available to them, that when they go home to their family and they're saying, hey, guess what I heard about today? And their children hear this, just imagine the effect that would have on families that are going through this crisis. So the problem is not us sitting here and talking about that we have these benefits and funding are available. The biggest issue is actually getting out into the communities that are so affected by job loss, so affected by children that are in school but have to be home doing Zoom. But while they're home at Zoom, they hear their parents arguing about how we're going to make bills, how we're going to take care of food. It's a direct effect to all the family. So getting the word out is the most important issue that I think this panel has to overcome. And it has to be a mandate where we get it out to religious organizations, churches. We have to get it out to magisterial judges so that their staff can get it out. We have to get it out through our political offices, through town meetings, whichever way possible. I don't know all the answers, but it has to be done because it's so, it is just affecting our community at a devastating rate. And I get constant phone calls as to what we can do to address this. So I hope that that's one of the main things that we take away from this forum today, is making sure that this information, this vital and important information, gets out to the communities that are so devastated by the effects of COVID.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note, so there was the moratorium by Governor Wolf through last August. And then there was the federal moratorium via the CDC. And I think that's interesting and important to note that it's through the CDC, because the federal government, even back in September, noted that this is a health crisis. Evictions are a health crisis because whole families out on the street during a pandemic. At any time, it's a terrible situation, but during the pandemic, it takes on new meaning. The other thing about the CDC moratorium is that rent is accumulating. It's not that renters just don't have to pay their rent and that's going to all be expunged. That's not the case. And so if you look at this past year, you look at people, let's say, paying $500, $600 a month in rent, or would be paying $500, $600, you times that by 12 and continuing on for months. And Commissioner Lawrence touched on this, that these things are ending. These moratoriums are ending. But when they do, not only are people going to be vulnerable to eviction, they're going to have all that past rent due. And what is that going to do to us, to our society, to our communities from a financial perspective? And what is that going to do to our communities regarding our children in schools and the mental health toll that it takes on them that Angie touched on? So I think that these are all very important things to note. Do any of the participants want to, I know each of you had a few minutes to talk, but do any of you want to touch on any other topics?
Yeah, no, I have a comment just to complement a little bit of what Mr. Graham was saying. For me, has always also be about access, right? And I guess for our community, for the Latino community who are English language learners, is a very important point. I'm always very vocal, not only with the county, but all the agencies when they said we're gonna offer this program, that there are no different ways to access to that information, and how we share that information in different languages, right? And how do we provide that to people, for example, our seniors, right? That of all colors, it doesn't matter who they are, who may not have access to computers. So I think that's a piece that we all have to reflect, and also, capacity. And that's when I'm concerned, because a couple of the comments is about capacity, and I feel obligated, and I feel so horrible because I'm running one of the organizations, and we're trying to get through applications. And I think it's a good reflection, right? That people, that we say, yes, we have these programs, but we have to have the capacity to deliver the programs. Otherwise, the money sits there. So I think we have to reflect on that. And when I go and meet with my team in Your Way Home, right, we're gonna be talking about that, because I think it's a good reflection, and we need to think about how can we increase our capacity to serve more people, so people are not waiting for that long.
Well, oh, I'm sorry, Natasha, just real quick, Nelly, you mentioned the language barrier, and so my office has been creating documents in Spanish, but it's more about the access, right? The language barrier is part of it, but you're right. It's where do you even get this information, right? So to Eddie's point about having it come through the DJs, having it come through the Court of Common Pleas, having it come through the school districts, and I see some of my friends who are school board members. I think that could be really helpful. But Natasha, do you have something you want to say?
What I was going to say is that the rental assistance program puts us as community members and as community leaders, puts us in a unique position of being able to help both the renter and the landlord, right? Oftentimes we're, in courtrooms, we're in community meetings, and we're saying, the renter, the tenant. But this program helps us kind of extend our reach. And so we should be also putting this information out to the landlords, right? We want to stop them from filing the evictions at all. And if they have the information about the rental assistance program and they can provide that to their tenants, then we're talking about, taking them out of the program altogether, right? They can get the information, they can apply for the assistance, and they can keep their homes, because that's what our ultimate goal is. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that individuals, men, women, and children can stay in their homes. And so I think that we have to include, the big bad landlord too, because in this fight, they can be an ally to us.
No, you're absolutely right, Natasha. And like I touched on earlier on, there are not every landlord is the big bad landlord. There are landlords that are also struggling. I think we're focusing on the tenants, the renters, because there's so many people that are going to be struggling from this, and there's a kind of a greater impact. But there's an impact on landlords as well. I agree.
No,
Yeah.
Can I jump in just for a second? Yeah. The money in this program is not money that we want to have left over. Okay, so that's why we're doing this. This is not money we want to save. This is not money that we're going to say we want to help as many households as we can. I put my email in the chat. As Nelly said, there's a lot of things. If people aren't hearing back, send them to me. This is not something we're looking to hold on to or save. Okay, we want to spend every dollar that we can to help as many households as we can.
Kyle, I know it looks like you had something else you wanted to mention.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think my fellow panelists are spot on. And I just want to make sure I say that in a spirit of collaboration with tenants, landlords, government, everyone across the board, I think we should always still advocate for affordable housing. Moving forward, I think that is extremely key, and trying our best to find better ways to collaborate in that effort. I think that's the key to actually keeping people in their homes long-term as things move on. So I think if we can do that, I think we've made a great stride.
Noah, you mind if I chime in real quick?
Please.
Great point, Kyle. And if any of you have seen a report that recently came out, Montgomery County is a very expensive place to live. Norristown is an inexpensive place to live. And if you compare Norristown to Abington, they're pretty much, they fall in line where it comes to being able to afford to live in both places. So affordable housing is a must. But I wanted to touch on something Councilman Schenk, who's on the call from Bridgeport, said. Sometimes we have to be these advocates. A simple conversation like he mentioned, a phone call to a landlord in behalf of somebody, having a conversation with someone about their finances. One thing we can say, we've seen a lot of resources come through individuals, whether it be PUA money, whether it be stimulus money. I think we have the responsibility to be mentors and even the connector sometimes when it comes to these evictions and trying to help people manage this process. When you're getting evicted, of course, it's not the first thing on your mind. And oftentimes you need an advocate on the side who can go to court with you, who can send an email in your behalf. But I think that's extremely important. Everybody on this call who works, we all work in these roles and these positions, our emails and our words are powerful to get behind some of our residents. So that's just something I wanted to touch on.
Thank you. Michelle, did you have something to note?
Yes, there's been a lot of discussion about the moratorium, both in the chat and here. I do want to just clarify some important points about it. The CDC moratorium only prevents evictions for non-payment of rent. So we are seeing a lot of landlords who move on non-monetary basis, just refusing to renew the lease and then claiming the lease term is expired. Obviously, they're not renewing because their client didn't, or their tenant didn't pay rent. Or we're seeing things like unauthorized occupants or unauthorized pets that the landlord knew about and previously had no issue with, but they're using them as pretext. So we see a lot of tenants who walk into these kind of hearings really unprepared or not really knowing what the CDC moratorium does. So I do think, as others have mentioned, education is an enormous element of this. And people who, may have questions about this, people can come to legal aid for advice if they qualify. We don't necessarily have to represent them if that's not what they're seeking. But I think it is important for everyone to take away from that it's an incomplete moratorium. It's not a complete bar for the landlord, but that's not dispositive. Just because the landlord alleges something other than rent, don't assume that it doesn't apply. Look at it carefully, see if this is a pretext such that a judge would look at it more closely. And I wanted to raise that because a lot of people assume that something non-monetary is pled, there's nothing they can do, which may not be the case.
Can I, just to touch on that, Michelle, at what point can people reach out to you? So say they have a landlord that they're not yet at the eviction, they're not having that conversation, but they are starting to do these things which are leading in that direction. Is there a certain point, like, do they have to be in the eviction process to reach out for your help, or can they reach out sooner than that?
That's an excellent question, and they can reach out to us at any point. So we have a lot who come to us when they get the notice to quit. We get some who come to us when they get the hearing notice, or some that come to us after the hearing is over. My advice is the earlier in the process they come to us, the better. Because if they come to us before there's been a complaint filed, we can negotiate with the landlord and they haven't already spent those funds filing the complaint, $120 to $200. They're not already committed. So they can come to us at any point. In fact, we have a lot of clients who come to us for things other than eviction matters, like warranty of habitability issues or harassment or retaliation or discrimination. They can come to us the moment they believe that there's a problem. Obviously, at that point, we won't actually be able to enter our appearance on a case, but we can advise them. We can negotiate with the landlord. We can point them in the direction and assist them with getting rent relief. There's a lot we can do, and there's no magic threshold. They can come to us at any point.
I'd like to say something. It's important that I'm hearing what everybody is saying, and I know that people are reactionary to all of these horrible things that's happening as far as the eviction and the mental trauma that people suffer. And for me personally, and tell me if I'm wrong, the best remedy to reaction is proaction. And we have to, I'm hoping that these organizations that's talking about people coming to them because of the nature and the culture of what we are finding ourselves in as a result of COVID, and also unemployment and all of the other nuances that come with it, that we could be more proactive in reaching out to the churches, reaching out to the communities, reaching out to the landlords, and actually making sure that they know that there's another way to do this. My second issue is I didn't need to ask this question because we have a lot of vacant properties, and is it possible that these people that are getting evicted, maybe you can help me with this, is it possible that we can have some type of funding set aside so when people are evicted, unfortunately, that has to happen sometime for landlords, that they have a place to go while they try to adjust to the eviction. I mean, there has to be some kind of place that people can go to where their children are not totally traumatized by eviction. And I don't know if legal aid can help. They should be in the churches talking to the pastors. They should have paperwork that they can have sent home to the family members, to the parents. So a lot of kids are being raised by their grandparents. We need to be able to get this information to the people and be more proactive and talk to the people that when they file for eviction, have a conversation with the landlord to say that, look, we have another alternative. Would you be willing to be a part of this program and offer some type of incentive, especially if they know that these people have paid their rent and they are affected by COVID or unemployment or whatever those issues are? It's a question and a suggestion. Can anybody speak to that?
Linda, I'll say thanks so much, Linda. First off, I did not see your hand up. I'm not as tech savvy with the little hand button there, and I was kind of concentrating on the pen.
I was trying to be respectful because you know.
Yeah, it's hard. I was kind of concentrating on the panelists, and I missed you. But I mean, to your point, Linda, you know, again, by the time someone gets to my office, they're appealing the eviction. That was my point earlier, that we can't wait that long. I can't just talk about what my office does. We got to collaborate so that we capture people all along the way. And so I reached out to Pastor Mitchell and to Pastor Coleman months ago on this issue to disseminate some of the information that my office came up with to people in their congregations. And I think that's really important, is finding people where they're at. And Angie and I talk about this, you know, she said this very early on when we were having these discussions. Angie, I think last summer, right, you raised the point, we have to find people where they are. And I know Eddie Graham is big on this in Springfield. And Eddie, maybe you could speak to this, but the school district, you know, it'd be great if they could reach out to the children and families within the school district to kind of disseminate this information, you know, and the more we reach out to these communities, the less stigma it's going to have, the more people understand this is happening to people in our community. You know, this isn't happening to those people. This is happening to people in our community, whatever those people means. So Eddie, I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yes, this is something that we've been, that Angie and I know that we've been advocating for at least the last year. And like I said, the main thing is that people just aren't aware of this programming. And I honestly think that Natasha, who is actually the second vice president of the Cheltenham branch NAACP, in addition to her chairing the Women in NAACP, our WIN chapter, she is going to be taking the point on leading this discussion with our different DJs throughout Montgomery County and helping to address this issue. Because it's, as Nelly said, it's the lack of information. Because if it benefits both the tenant, but the landlord. The tenant has the pressure of getting the rent off their back, and the landlord gets his money. So we can just make sure that we can come up with some sort of programming where we can reach out to our religious, to our churches, to everyone that is here on this particular call. That's where the first hurdle in getting and overcoming this problem is. Getting the information out, because people are not aware of it. And like Ken says, we don't want to have to give the money back, because if we don't spend all the money, it goes back, and we won't be getting any additional funding to address this ongoing issue. So I know that Natasha is going to be heading this up for our branch, but I hope that everyone on this call realizes the vital and the importance of getting this messaging out, regardless of how discomforting that conversation may be with people within your area. It has to get out to help these people.
I need to say that they're in the people go to the supermarket every day. People go to the pharmacy every day. that information needs to be distributed there. Everywhere where people go, that's where the information needs to be. And all in Spanish and in English, it's important that that happens. But I still need to hear, what can we do about these vacant properties? If it's so much money and it goes back, why can't we use that money to have that supplement for people to be able to transition, have a transition house? You know, like when people get out of prison, they have a place where they can transition to get a job and then move. Can't we do something similar like that for people that are evicted legitimately because of reasons that are out of their control?
So Linda, that's a great point that you're making. And we do actually is part of a series of events that we're going to do. And the next one is going to be more specific to homelessness. And so I think we will definitely address that concern or can pull that into the conversation in preparation for that. I would like to also ask, is it possible, and I think it would make a lot of sense, if we have these different providers of resources, is there a way to create like a one-pager, if you will, right, with the resources that we can then distribute like to the schools so they have it available? I think sometimes when you have to go, just thinking as an individual or a teacher, when there's so many different places, this isn't your life every day, right? So it feels overwhelming. And so if we can find a way to create like a document specific to this issue with resources, I think that could maybe be helpful, and then distribute it to the churches, to the schools, you know, to all of those places, going back to meet people where they are, if you will.
Angie, I just want to add something for Mrs. Fields. Hi, it's Nelly, Mrs. Fields. So
Hi,
how are you? So I just wanted to add, for the ERIC program, we are allowed to help people to transition from, if they get evicted, we can actually help them transition, and we are able to maybe pay for, a couple of weeks of hotel, and then helping them with the deposit and the first month's rent. So that's part of the program, right? I cannot talk about vacancies, but that's part of the program. And the good thing about Your Way Home is that we have different resources, different shelters and other resources, but this money, I know, brings that peace. So we have already helped, like this week, I was in a hotel in King of Prussia delivering a check so the family wouldn't sleep in the streets, because, we didn't want them to sleep in the street while they're finding another place. So that is part of the program.
Okay, that's wonderful. What about Salvation Army? I mean, they're not always full. Like when people have fires and things like that, can they accommodate that? Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of every kind of way that we can have a place for someone to go, especially with the children, because and they never get over that. That's a trauma that they never get over. And I just, my heart pours out. I mean, I'll open up my house if my husband don't kick me out, but,
Yeah.
but let's just try to find ways to use that money that Ken is talking about where it doesn't go back.
Right. And one, as a provider, one of the things that the county have told us from the beginning is go and spend money. You're never going to hear that from them, except for this case, right? So that's a good thing. Again, I think because we started the program, it's about capacity, but I agree with you. And Your Way Home, it has an intake unit that they receive calls, and they are connected with the shelters, and they're able to place some people. But for us who already have cases, we also have money for that. So I think that's going to help.
So I just want to, because I think some people are kind of
anything that I could do to volunteer, I'm there.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much.
I want to offer anything I could do to help.
Understood. Thank you. And I just want to, if we could just kind of, bring it to a conclusion, I think, because some people are dropping off and we've kind of gone over an hour here, which was kind of envisioned this would go for about an hour, but there's so much to talk about. And Commissioner Lawrence, pointed out on one of our calls when we were planning this, how important it's not just about evictions, but there's so much to this. There's about home ownership and quality homes for people, and getting people to have, you know, a mindset that, you know, there's a way to get out of renting, you know, and for your entire life, that you can own a home, but for a lot of people, it's not attainable. So how did they get that, and how to make it more attainable? And I think that's something we want to continue to talk about. And as Angie pointed out, talk about the discussion of homelessness specifically, and a lot of the ideas Linda was just putting forth, maybe fleshing them out a little bit before the next panel or the next forum. So I just want to thank everyone for jumping on. I know Judge Sersky jumped on. Thank you so much, Judge, for everything you're doing. And again, there's so many elected officials in this call, I can't point out everyone, but I want to thank everyone for joining. And I especially want to thank our participants, Commissioner Lawrence, and everyone who jumped on. So
can I ask one quick question though before we conclude? And I want to thank everyone also. This is amazing and I'm so grateful. But with regard to the suggestion about the judges having this documentation, who do we speak to try? Would that be like the president judge that we would talk to about potentially having them have information available?
yeah, so who I went through, so we got my information from my office on how to appeal in every single district court. And so I think if you want to do the same thing, you would take the avenue that I did. I would contact court administration. And court administration is the arm for the courts, the office that kind of runs the court system. So I would reach out to court administration. That's on the county website with any ideas you have, and we can certainly talk about it kind of, you know, offline and see if we can shake some trees a little bit and get the information out there more.
That definitely needs to be done, Angie. I will join you in partnering with you in that issue.
Okay, thank you. Listen, I know it's going to close out, but I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for taking the time out today. You know, the NAACP in Norristown, in, you know, addition to Cheltenham and all the work Nelly's doing, we want to be here. So if anybody comes across an issue and you're having trouble, feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to make sure that we can get you in connection with the appropriate people. Because this is so important, and so many kids and just people in general are impacted by this issue. And I think we all kind of have to think more creatively and more proactively to find ways to just stop this from happening in the first place. So I will turn it back over to Noah. Thank you, Noah, for all your work on this. He has had multiple meetings with me in preps to try to plan it. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Angie. And thank you for everyone. Everyone stay safe, please. And you can always contact me. I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you so much.